Hello, Fabian.
Hello, hello.
I saw some amazing things on the Twitter. Even though we're going to be very short-staffed today, maybe you want to present for us and for the future.
With pleasure. Always
Cool.
happy to do that.
Something weird here on the computer. Mark, I see you. If you thought you could hide, you were wrong. Peter will be here today, so that's good. Sorry, I'm just trying to. We had a sports meeting at your school today, and started raining phenomenally horrible, which was, of course, very photogenic. So I just had something I need to save in the background, and it's done. Oh yeah, hang on. Sending message to Deanie and Andrew. I included you in that, Mark, because there was the kind of a what's it called? The overleaf chat. So also to report, I've been working hard every now and again when I can on the high resolution thinking paper. I've referenced you a couple of times, Mark. I've referenced Peter's paper. I have referenced Adam's gesture work. I have referenced you a little bit, Fabienne, but I would like you, if you want to include something, either write your own paper or give me a paragraph on your general scaffolding notion and everybody should be able to change the code notion because they're almost the same, but they're not exactly the same points, right? Or do you feel it's the same aspect of the same thing? I mean, two aspects of the same thing.
Can you send back the paper and I'll skim through before answering that, please? Or the draft?
I can do that. I've done such things and I can do such things. So who's excited about the Apple's keynote in 2 hours? Come on. Super exciting.
Well, what's your bet? What do you think is going to be?
I don't know, and to one extent, I don't care, but I think they're going to do some sort of a Vision OS updates. So it's going to be really interesting if they're just going to introduce new things there, or if they're going to be fixing some um, what do you call it, quality of life issues. Like today, I went into the club with only the headsets. I was only there for an hour, but writing about XR in a headset is interesting because it forces me to accept the realities of it, which is different from the imagination, obviously. And there are small things like when you're typing with a Bluetooth keyboard, you quite clearly got the keyboard, suddenly the virtual keyboard pops up. Nonsense issues like that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they even are possible to fix based on having a mixed kind of a interface. I'm certainly hoping so.
So no Vision Pro 2?
Not for another 2 years at least. And I think it's going to be a Visionaire. Visionaire, that sounds almost French. Hello, this is the Visionaire.
How very stylish.
Visionaire, now with colors designed by Emily in Paris.
So by that, do you mean essentially a non-pro version, a cheaper version of the existing tech, or?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I've read is yes, exactly that. And I don't know how they're going to save money by, cutting down. It may quite simply be that the Pro 2 comes out at the same time, so the Vision Air becomes similar to this. But I mean, there's so many obvious things that can improve, like having the battery on the headsets at the back, to balance in a slightly less cool looking thing. But yeah, I mean, I happen to have extremely strong upper body hair because of my trainer. I'm very lucky. I didn't have that earlier in my life. So I don't really notice the weight of it very much. But just because that happens to be how I am at this particular point in my life, it's not really design excuse, is it? So one thing hang on, I'm just going to open author here. For my high resolution paper, thinking in high resolution thing is audio. I haven't really written about that yet. So let me just put a note in. Because one of the things we have realized, I think, in our group is that when you can't easily touch something, voice becomes even more important. Where's
So
Peter? Sorry.
where has voice got to in terms of working across a broad spectrum? So, lucky are the people. Well, it's a bit like you're lucky if you speak and write English and not, I don't know, Inuit, because there's a much bigger digital trove. It seems to me that I haven't seen anything saying that actually voice recognition has got much better in terms of sort of not non-standard, for want of a better word, accents.
Can you repeat that? I couldn't quite understand you. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Okay. So
No, I'm
if
kidding.
you,
That was a joke on your perfect English. Sorry, that was humor.
no, but I totally get it. If you, it doesn't really. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, but if you're not part of the norm center, then you basically don't get any of the affordances.
Well, let's ask the Frenchman in the room. How do you feel speaking to Siri in the headset?
Well, you saw the demonstration last week. Like when it works, it works. When it doesn't, it doesn't. That being said, I discussed a little. So it's a little bit frustrating. It's funny also though, because I would take it as a personal offense, except that, for example, I was in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and there were a couple of locals that tried to use Siri on their own, and they were native speakers, and yeah, Siri was also like, "Meh, what is this?" So it's far from perfect. The thing. So the demo though last week was interesting because, of course, not on camera, but off camera, off the record, I was able to say, "Do this, do that, do this," and I think it was quite efficient. That being said, it's also, even though it's composable, it is quite limited. So I had a discussion briefly with Leon after this to see how core error correction could take place. Like, for example, if you say box instead of cube or the other way around, or if it says books where it should say box, and then you had a keyword before it, like add, and it's always should be a box rather than a book, because it's just like syntactically, I guess, not correct. Or yeah, so there are ways, but then it starts to become quite complicated. The one thing though that I did after discussing or showing you before is like a kind of escape hatch, is that even when it fails, at least you have a post-it note with your failure, so you can see what it is and eventually try to amend it or learn from that mistake. So I think if you don't have to think too deep or too hard, and you don't get sidetracked by failed like recognition of your speech, then I think it's still valuable in some cases. That being said, I don't think it's magical. That I can't imagine using this well, for example, in the club Frode you mentioned, or even in the train, in the anything that is not like basically my own home. it's kind of difficult. And then if I'm in my own home, I probably have my perfect screen with my great keyboard and whatnot. So it's kind of tricky. But yeah, I was still happy to explore. So I think there is something there. What is it and in what use cases? I'm not sure, but it's fun to try.
Two things on that. The one thing, long time ago, MIT, I just read it somewhere, that they had a very good, for the time, speech recognition system, but during demos it never worked. And they found that the lack of feedback, having somebody say, "Oh, yeah," mumbling, really makes it difficult when someone is talking. And I've noticed in Zoom here, you may have noticed in some of our meetings that I will add to someone talking and I'll say, "Yeah," or something. And that, because it's Zoom, gets interpreted as an interruption, which of course sometimes I interrupt and I shouldn't, but generally it is, yeah, for speech recognition, that helps. In Zoom, clearly not. The other side of it is, I have found that the Vision Pro for me, even in a loud background environment, is really, really good. Much better than, okay, an iPhone you take up to your head to actually speak in is fine too. But in terms of not having to lift something, the way it deals with background noise is really fantastic. But the problem I have with Siri on Vision is not so much that she's a bit of an idiot sometimes. It is, I can't speak to the software I'm using. I can't say undo, I can't say bold, I can't do any of that. The guys are trying to find out if that's going to be possible. Maybe we'll find out tonight that there's a new way of doing it, because it's kind of crazy the way it is now.
So I'm not sure in terms of like what you mean by if it's possible or not. One example I did in the demo was do a thing like make a box appear and then clone it and then delete it. So if you clone and delete, it's basically undo. And I don't have any problem having at least conceptually, but technically, honestly, I'm rather maybe again naively confident about this, that if you have a stack of actions, so for example, the commands that have been successfully recognized so far, then you basically add them like a stack, and then you, for the, let's say, some commands like add, then delete is the obvious like undoing step. So I think a lot of it, like undo, 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 and then you have your 3 or 4 different actions and done. I again naively, but I don't see any hard problem there.
No, but it's good. In WebXR, I remember it, but if I'm using Author or another third-party app, I cannot speak in a way that Siri will understand. She won't do any commands. So the fact that it works in WebXR is just really good.
It's funny. I imagined. Well, I don't want to speak about native. Actually, I don't. It's a little bit. I'm going to sound, I guess, wrong there. But a colleague asked me last week if I could help him install an open source pedagogical software on his computer. I briefly tried, and then it didn't work. And I was like, "Sorry, my dear colleague, but this is Windows. It's a Windows-related issue. I don't want." Like, if I can find a solution for you right away, of course, I'm happy to do this, but I don't want to invest my own resources in closed source software because I know it's going to be one-off, let's say. So here, I imagine that native should have some APIs to use Siri and you should be able to use it, but I don't know. And to be upfront is I don't really want to care if I can have and also for the, let's say, to justify a bit my harshness here. The one thing I tried to do earlier today was to contact another browser. So it's called Volvic and it's open source. So that's why it's interesting in my opinion. And it works in WebXR. So in the headset, like on the Quest, for example, and the Lynx. So that they would also use web speech API. So implement web speech just like on the Vision Pro. Because that's the same brief discussion I had with Leon about this. Like, oh, cool, it's a new exciting feature that opens new possibilities. But for there are very few people on Earth with a Vision Pro, so it's not really inclusive. Whereas if, let's say, a browser have an experimental on the Vision Pro, on the Quest, rather allows to also do this kind of things, then suddenly the reach and the number of people who can benefit from that is much, much broader.
I don't have a problem with that perspective at all. I'm developing because it's cheaper for me to do native, and I like native for other reasons, but philosophically and morally, I agree with you. So if it turns out it can't be done native and only online, WebXR, I consider that a win. So yeah, that's we're on the same page there. It's just a very odd thing. I mean, I even had to add undo to the context menu because there is no other undo available, which is interesting craziness.
Yeah, it's interesting. I fell in that rabbit hole because I was looking up something to do with Scrivener earlier, which is, Scrivener, for those who don't know, is a writing tool built by someone who just one day just gave up on Word because all he wanted to do was write, not wrestle with Microsoft. Originally on the Mac, but now on Mac and Windows. But he was clearly being sort of baited slightly by his users in his forum, saying, when are you going to have built-in AI? And it's very interesting. He was just laying out actually how complicated it was once you get into bed with all these native things, and then the vendor just walks away from you. So an interesting thing is, I rather take Fabian's point about if it's something that is open, or at least not tied, not walled within a vendor, because then suddenly you're yoked to a cart, and you don't know quite where it's going. And yet it seems, if we're to believe the AI boosters that we're all going to be using this thing, then we probably don't want it delivered. We actually want it coupled to our OS sort of thing rather than part of it. Otherwise you get no choice. And all the sort of things that, all those things you click through, like, do you want all your information sent? So all the things you don't think about, and not least because in the wider population, you wouldn't even know this was an issue until it was too late. So there's some interesting stuff to be done there. I mean, what I don't get with the Siri thing is the issue vis-a-vis doing stuff in Vision simply because somebody hasn't, it's as simple as somebody not having written the code, or is there a more structural problem than, somebody deciding to spend the engineering cost of doing that?
Well, I mean, it's Apple's operating system. It doesn't have a hook for me. So when you talk to Siri, you're talking to an outside agent standing over your shoulder, so to speak, rather than the software in front of you. Of course, on the Mac, you can't easily speak to Siri about what's in front of you either. But in an XR environment, you're much more reduced in your interaction, so it would make sense. But as far as the integration is concerned, obviously I have AI in Reader and Author. And the way that I've done that, the end user sees a function called Ask AI, because that's brandless. And then I update the API when it needs to be updated. And of course, my implementation is very simple. Select text, run a prompt on it. That's it. I'm sure that Scrivener, that Keith is trying to do other things that's more involved. And there, of course, the risk of APIs breaking, leaving, changing are much greater. So yeah. Plus, it's another commercial entity interacting. And here we have Peter.
Good morning. Well, everyone, I'm very happy to report that I finally have my latest bit of new kit.
Oh,
my, it's happening.
It's been a long time coming.
we reached a singularity.
I told everyone that I knew you were coming today. I didn't tell them why I knew you were coming today. Super cool.
I would haven't believed you without actually seeing it, you see.
Well, thanks for keeping the secret for the big reveal.
Yeah, that was very, very cool. That was a secret worth keeping.
So to also be upfront there, how can we help you, Peter, for the onboarding? Like, is there anything frustrating that doesn't work? Because a lot of us, at least, I don't want to say most of us, have been very positive about it, but I don't want us to be naive or candid. So whatever doesn't work is most likely not on you, but on the device, onboarding, etc. So yeah, if we can help, please do ask.
Okay, I'm never sure what button do I push when I'm trying to do the equivalent of a regular mouse click, because sometimes it seems like one button will do it, and other spots it seems like another button will do it, and I'm just like pushing all the buttons, and it seems to work eventually, and I'm not sure which one of the button pushes was the one that actually did the trick.
I'm very glad this is recorded. This is exactly the kind of new user dialogue we need. Fabian, oh, no, actually, either one of you, Fabian, Mark, fight over how you can help him, because this is
So my first,
muting myself.
to clarify a little bit is, do you mean, Peter, the operating system, or if you're within an app, or both? Because I think the OS is roughly coherent, probably not all the time, but probably most of the time. But if you switch, let's say, from an application, let's say one of my WebXR page, maybe the interaction model is completely different. So where do you mean this happening different way to click, basically?
Operating system and also in some of the apps.
So yeah, for the apps, it's not, at least I would say, Meta is not like Apple that say, hey, the way to do things is this way. It's a little bit like anything goes, even though they give guidelines. So if there is a difference, it's, I want to say, normal. There is not just one way to pinch, click, etc. In the OS, it's a mistake if they don't do it. It should be totally coherent. You also meant, just to clarify, with the controllers like that, or with hand tracking?
Hand tracking seemed like stabbing into objects did the trick, but I'm a little fuzzy on the controllers.
For the controller, there is one thing that might help. It's basically based on distance. So if I have my secret book that I'm not going to show you right now, but if I have this book in front of me, which represents the screen of the OS, if it's here, then I'm quite close, let's say 30 centimeters, even less. Then it's going to be directly touching. And if I'm further away, let's say 50 centimeters, a meter, or beyond that, then it becomes laser pointer. It's not a mistake, it's a design decision, but the switch from one to the other is a little bit like it just happened. So that might also have been a surprising point.
Fabian, is that switch, is that so the thing that tells you which sort of those two modes, in a sense, the headset is in, is that presumably whether you see the sort of laser line or not? Okay.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. But it's also that might have changed from one version to the next. So it's even for daily users, it's a little bit of a challenge. So yeah, Peter, if it's sometimes disorienting, I don't want to be apologetic on the Meta's decision, but it is also for us, is my point.
One sort of thing, as probably one of the sort of least experienced of the other three in the room, so Peter, one of the things I have found is that if you're having a difficulty with the hand tracking and you just want to get something done, just pick up the controllers. It's far more accurate, far more steady. One of the big things I find, and I haven't quite understood, is that once you start, it's almost the moment you point at something, instead of almost acknowledging you've reached a target, what tends to happen is that it's almost as if the whole thing goes haywire. What's missing? One interaction that's definitely missing is a sort of is an interstitial thing, saying, okay, right, you've now pointed at this. I haven't accepted an input, but I've noticed you're pointing at me. Otherwise, I've noticed what tends to happen is the tracking thing goes anywhere but the thing you're trying to point at. And the more you try and concentrate on pointing at it, the more it resists letting you do that. Whereas that is not a problem at all with the hand controllers.
Let's see, another issue. How do I force quit an app that hung? I was in the browser and the browser hung, and then the whole browser screen started sort of getting jittery, and I couldn't figure out how to get out of it.
I'm not sure that, I mean, you can use ADB. So if you're in developer settings and plug in the console, etc., but I don't think through the normal interface, I don't think it's feasible. I mean, rebooting, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not hitting my power stud until got into the.
Yeah. Otherwise, what I remember it happened. If what you can normally always do at least is go back to the OS. So if a WebXR page or an app is jittery or whatever,
It was a WebXR page, so
yeah. So normally, if you press the OS button, the little meta symbol, that should bring you back there.
okay. So at the operating system level, what's the canonical form of a mouse click using the controllers?
I want to say the index press, pointing at it, and then index press.
Right hand index press?
It's depends. It's the last hand you used, because for example, if you start to interact with the menu like this in front of you, and you use the right hand, that's basically the mouse pointer. So if you switch to left hand click, I think it activates it, but it's not clicking yet. So I think you need to click a second time. I think they try overall. It's same like if you start to put them down on the table, then it becomes hand tracking. So they try to be as agnostic and inclusive of the different ways to interact. And in practice, can be a little bit tricky, which also reminds me that, as Mark suggested, if you want something that's pretty much foolproof, use the controllers. And if you never want hand tracking, you can even disable that in the options. I'd honestly recommend it because hand tracking most of the time does work. So it's like convenient. You just do things. But if you want something like reliable, no mistakes, precise, you can still disable that in the OS in the settings menu.
Yeah, because when I was using hands, a couple times I wanted to touch something that was farther out than my arm's length, and that was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, theoretically, if the app is well designed, they should have some way to transform to a laser pointer or like one thing that Thomas, the friend who made Cubism, did is if you point, I think, with the open hand toward the piece of the cube that would be too far, it's going to highlight it, and then it's going to bring it a bit closer to you. But it's not.
I didn't know about that. Okay, that's good to know.
It's per app. So if the person who developed the app didn't think about it beforehand, you stuck with the thing, the virtual object being basically unreachable. It's not an OS thing. So it's maybe the app you tried did not have that.
I sense one thing here that I'm sort of reminded of the fact, because I'm aware. I mean, I for instance, use it far less than you do, Fabian, and sort of the system as a whole. Is that so? One of the challenges, I don't want to call it a sort of, it's not a failure, because the problem is from the sort of vendor standpoint is you can show someone how to do something. The hard part is to know. It's a sort of space repetition problem. How do you know when the user actually now intuitively understands it? So the thing that Fabian's been sort of describing, like, just in a sense, just naturally moving from the hands to the controller to whatever. So there are some rubrics in there. I suspect that it would be more useful if it was not just shown to you, but told to you. So the showing shows you how it works. The telling probably tells you what you remember, is my gut feeling. Because I find that just seeing it often doesn't help enough. You need something to hang it on. The showing tells you what the words don't give you, but the words are what you remember. And that's perhaps a weakness in it. But it is difficult, because it will take different people different times to do this. And that's partly dependent on how often you use it. So if you get it and you're going to use it, well, as long as the battery's not dead almost continuously from get-go, you'll pick up things very quickly. If you use it, do an hour here and then do an hour next week, that sort of is going to get much more lumpy about the learning. And I mean, I don't know the way around that, but I assume that maybe in other areas of work, people, doing training have addressed this.
Frode?
There is the training aspect of this, absolutely, Mark, but it's also horrible the way it is. Sorry to use that word again, I didn't mean to, but what Apple has, there's a button on the headset. You click on it, and you're on the desktop. Right? If you need to force restart, you press and hold both buttons. Right? The second one, you kind of have to be told, as a special told. And this one, the digital crown press, you're told pretty quickly. It's part of your introduction. But the fact that in the Quest, there are no ways to do this that are always available is so stupid. And it's the second reason I don't like to recommend it. The other reason is when you're in a room, and it's a new room, you have to go around and draw the room or specify that you're actually sitting. I mean, it's a tiny bit of friction, but it's unnecessary. You know, today Fabian posted about a new version where of WebXR it can analyze the room and it know where the table and chair is, which is fantastically useful. But until you have that and putting it on, it's just very odd. Anyway, Peter, I'm glad that you are learning some of the annoyance points because they really impact how we think about the world. But before, Mark, I just have to ask you, Peter, have you had a chance to try any of Andrew's demos?
I tried to go into it from the labs page. It said for the latest demo, and something went wrong, and I was suddenly like floating in this void with walls that crazy 1960s Batman camera angles, and that was actually when the headset locked up on me.
Oh,
So that must have been like an older version of his demo that was written before the operating system update.
crazy. But thank you for mentioning that.
It was very strange because I was like in sort of a gray void, and there were like a couple grid papers sort of floating out at some crazy angles. A couple of blue axis lines on the grid papers, but I couldn't move around or do anything. And when I tried clicking on the load button to load in the database, nothing loaded.
Well, that's very weird.
Sorry, a quick trick also. I mean, you probably figured it out yourself, but at least for people listening that might not be familiar with it, you can cheat by looking down your nose, so that sometimes, especially honestly, because we're all discovering the field and the possibilities, but especially we're pushing, I hope, what's possible, and thus, yes, sometimes it crashes. So here in that case, I don't know what the problem is. Is it the browser? Is it some work down here? Is it something else? But if you look down, you usually see below your nose the quote-unquote real world. And that means sometimes the headset is like laggish or slow, and it's a bad experience. And being able to just look down or even remove the headset, I think is a healthy habit. Like it's not good to have a bad experience in the headset and forcing oneself to go through it. So I think I recommend in such cases, if it lags, if it's bad or whatever, better remove it or look down or look away or go back to the OS and restart than have something that feels off, basically. Again, most of the time, if it's not like an app that's been through the store, vouch for, like AAA or whatever, it's expected. Let's experimental. So those little tricks of just removing the headset or looking down can help.
When I was trying to reach for the things, it actually reminded me there was a section in Curtis Hickman's Hyperreality text where he was describing one of the experiences they created that basically gave you a Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic arm stretching effect when you were trying to reach something that was out of reach. And I just thought, gee, I wish the Quest, I half expected intuitively when I was reaching forward, I'd see my simulated arm, and that the arm would keep stretching to 8 or 9 feet until it would actually reach the thing that I was trying to reach and point at.
But that's what the laser thing is supposed to do.
Well, I was throwing with thin hands, you know. I figured reaching out with hands, the hand should just keep going until.
I understand that, and I think that is something very much worth pursuing. But that is the point of the laser thing, and it doesn't really work. Anyway, sorry, Mark.
No, I was just thinking. I was thinking about your point you made about the Quest and the fact that it has this sort of thing about wanting to recite its boundary, and I wonder if that's a sort of legacy pull-through thing. So it's there because it was there in the Quest 2. The kit's probably got a bit cleverer, but people are doing it because I can see how you get in the mindset if you're building something, because you clearly need to do this because we need to do it before. You never stop to say, well, actually, is it strictly necessary now? Just because we did it, do we need to do it still? So I don't know how deeply the need to do that is wired. I have noticed with the Quest 3 sort of seems better at letting me do something without immediately saying, right, stop everything you're doing and set a boundary, which is of course unhelpful, because now your context of thought is ruined, and the thing you thought you were doing you've probably forgotten about by the time you've finished faffing around with the boundary. So it is sort of a problem, and it seems to be it's getting better, and it's good to hear that it's sort of less intrusive in the Pro, which sort of suggests this is a problem that will get solved. So I'm grinding my teeth less than I probably was when I first encountered this.
Yeah, that didn't seem to be much of an issue for me. I had no trouble recognizing the available carpet in my living room. One thing was a little weird. It was trying to find my Bluetooth keyboard and it couldn't find it. And I mean, it found the keyboard and was connected to the keyboard, but it said that it was unable to find it in world in order to create the simulation of the keyboard for me to see it. And at that point, I actually had to do the look down my nose in order to see where the keyboard was to get my fingers on it.
So there are just 2 keyboards reported for that feature, as far as I know. The Apple Magic one, and I want to say a Logitech one, but not all keyboards. For example, mine is not recognized. So it's going to be recognized as Bluetooth, and I can type, but it's not going to make like a camera half transparent pass-through for it. So maybe that's what happened. I don't know what model you use.
The Logitech MX Mini. It had a real nice keyboard feel for it. I picked it mainly for typing without worrying too much about it.
I'll look up the link and share.
I'll show it to you. One second.
So while he's getting it, so I've got one of these. I just can't get on with the tiny keyboards, but this is one of the Apple sort of full width extended keyboards that has all the keys I want on it. So you're saying that that can bond with a Quest 3, can it? I haven't tried.
So they all should work no problem in terms of Bluetooth, but in terms of having the feature where if you look down where it is, it's going to show you the actual keys, so that if you're a little bit, if you don't remember everything, then you can pick basically at it.
Well, yeah.
So Logitech Mini Quest.
I think today in the club with this, the normal Magic Keyboard.
Yeah.
It is amazing with the vision, with the quality to look down. It's almost like looking under the thing. It's so sharp. So I can see the keys I type.
Well, this one has a very nice key feel. So it was really great for touch typing, which was why I picked it out of the set of Bluetooth keyboards that they had available. And as a touch typist, that was the primary consideration.
I must say, I must try bonding a key. I hadn't thought to do it because I'm a self-confessed nudnik when it comes to touch typing. I've tried too many times. It's just my brain's obviously wired up the wrong way. But actually, that's quite interesting. I'd overlooked this idea of sort of looking down to effectively give a degree of pass-through, because that's an interesting way around the problem of an otherwise implicit need to be accurate in touch typing. Now I must experiment with that.
So I put the list, including I think some Logitech Mini and a lot of Apple ones over there now. Initially, it was just literally 2 types of keyboards, but now they added a dozen or more. So luckily yours are supported.
Maybe it's because the keyboard is black and the room was relatively dark at the time. What I'll have to do is like try putting a light lap desk in front of me and then see if it's able to spot it. So there'll be contrast between the keyboard and the desk. Yeah, because it's an MX Mini, but it's not a pale gray, it's the darker black color. So
you could like dip the edges in Tipex.
But it's great because it's absolutely silent keyboard and it feels real good for the touch typing. So even if I try to remember where it's positioned before I go in to full immersion, I was actually very impressed with the quality of the color pass-through. I wasn't expecting it to be good enough I could actually watch television and read a couple things, provided I made sure that they were within my distance prescription of the bifocals inside of the headset. Because when I tried to look at things that were in the near prescription inside of the headset, the near prescription doesn't actually work for near things if they're in the lower half of my visual plane. So I actually like moved the control bar up high enough to get it above my bifocal split. So
That's the other interesting thing about the Quest 3 that actually I discovered by accident when I just happened to put it on with my reading glasses on. Now, I don't have, I mean, I'm very slightly astigmatic in one eye, and otherwise I'm basically just sort of 0.2 plus 2.75. So standard sort of middle-age degradation of eyesight. And I'm actually even that's a massive improvement, because otherwise I found on the Oculus, I was sort of trying to, it always seemed to be that if I jammed the thing just a bit closer, then the headset would never hold it on my face. That was the moment things were in focus, but it wasn't particularly comfortable.
Yeah, so I think I'll probably get the inserts so that everything's the full distance prescription. I don't have to worry about the bifocal split issue. So that was good. I was impressed with the quality of the screen. Text was a lot better than I expected it was going to be.
And have you been ill yet?
No, that's the thing that amazed me the most. I haven't felt like toasting my cookies yet. I had 1 minute where I was a little bit out of whack when I was in the WebXR simulation with the Batman camera angles. And I think that would do it to anybody. But once I was back in the regular environment, everything was fine.
Yeah. I do recall actually when I first used the Quest 2, I tried one of those sort of virtual camera things, and there's one that basically had you standing on top of effectively the lightning spike on top of a skyscraper in New York. I definitely lost my sense of balance, despite knowing that actually I was standing in my living room. So that's good, but which sort of proves, in these fully immersed environments, the sort of the reality of the perception it can create.
Yeah, it's interesting, the reality of these things. Right.
I'm really looking forward. I'm really looking forward to the point where I can write my first Hello World WebXR app.
Yeah, what's the process for that, Fabian? Could you walk Peter through that? That would be really worth listening to, actually. I would appreciate that.
I'll try to share my screen, and because I literally have done that minutes ago, and I can even link back to the demo I was supposed to do now. So I will.
So there isn't an app for writing your first app.
There actually is, so that you don't have to do anything yourself. You don't even have to think. You don't have to host. It's pretty much turnkey. So let me try to share my entire screen, and please let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Super. Thank you. So I'm going to share. I go on. I'm going to give you one example. It's not necessarily the best or for everyone or whatnot, but I know this one works. So I know in terms of onboarding, works well. So I go on this website called aframe.io.
Fabian, since you said just one example, we don't have that much to talk about today. We may finish early. Please take your time with this. It is so extremely gratefully appreciated. This is
Definitely.
You don't need to rush.
Okay. But you will, so we will still have time to discuss, because hopefully you'll see it is quite fast to do. Of course, it's only the first steps, and then it will take you an infinite amount of time to do whatever you want, however you want. But seeing something in the headset, aframe.io, documentation, and here the getting started. You don't even have to copy and paste it. You do the first link you see on the page. So remix the starter page example on glitch.
What is glitch?
So glitch, a website to host websites. So there is a template there, which is a basic A-frame website. This one you can see here. It already works, it's already in 3D, but I'll do remix your own here. I can put also a link in the chat. I'll do that after. And then it's copying the website, and I have a new website that I will copy and share with you all in the chat so you can visit it live. And to prove it to you all, I will change the color of the sphere by pink. So
just
now,
quickly, Fabian, is the link there? I take it that the first part of the URL, the subdomain, is essentially your account identifier within Glitch, is it?
So it's not the account; it's literally that page.
Okay.
So it's just for that page, and I will not change it. I could change it to something like I don't know, future of text demo. But
Sure.
if I do this, it's going to break the link for you. And
Understood.
it's generated like 3 words, and that's it. So voila, you can see the cube and the sphere is now pink.
It is.
And if I
Just
want
tried
to
it.
use in the headset, I go on the trusted hmd.link. I paste it there. And if on the headset, I go on hmd.link on my same Wi-Fi, same network, I'll click on it on the headset in the Oculus browser, open it, and voila, it's all in.
Wait, could you explain what hmd.link is?
Yeah, so hmd.link is a website that's going to be generating, based on your public IP, a room, and in that room you can share a link. So if you, on your computer, go to hmd.link, you won't see what I see, because it's kind of like a small private space, some easy way to share content on the same network. And by network, I mean local network, not the internet.
So this loads for me in the headset, and it is amazing. A funny thing is when I look at it in Safari in Vision Pro and I move my head, it reacts, it moves. It's as though I'm holding it on an iPhone, moving it. But when I click on VR, it's not happy. It glitches a bit.
It should not glitch. It should be, you should have the sphere, cube, cylinder right in front of you.
I just thought it was a interesting thing. Okay, we're happy to view more. Can you show us a little more how to do stuff?
Well, yes, of course. By stuff, you have an example of something specific you'd like to see?
Yes, I would like Peter to be able to write hello world.
Well, then go for it, Peter. So I can clarify a bit, though, that what aframe.io does, it's basically to write HTML-ish or some entities and components. For example, a box color equal pink will make a 3GS object. So 3GS is a framework that allow making 3D objects on the web. Otherwise, it can be quite tricky writing shaders and things that are a bit, if you're not used to it, it can be a little bit complicated, whereas a lot more people, especially who are not already professional game developers, they can get used to it. It's like writing a div, but you get a box instead. So I want to say it's a much easier onboarding. But you still have access to the entire 3D stack. So if you want to write shaders, if you want to go lower level, you can still do that. I think recording has stopped. I know, my bad. Somehow the button was hidden for me.
Oh yeah, no, we're definitely recording.
Very good.
Peter, I'm sure you have
another question. I haven't gone into the meta worlds yet. When you do, how do you move around? You just like walk in your room, and are you limited to the space of your living room, or is there a way to get further than your physical boundary?
I think you can teleport. So I think if you look at, for example, the seat, and on that seat there is a sitting position, basically, then you can get there. So I don't think you're limited to your physical space. But I haven't used it for months. I guess the last time was with Frode and Mark too, actually. So I want to say 3 months ago, 6 months, maybe even.
So that then leads to a follow-up question for our newbie here, who philosophically is clearly not a newbie at all. What are the environments he should really try first? Because the Mozilla hubs used to be cool, and now it's almost a wasteland, and it hasn't updated as well, which is quite sad. Where should he go?
Everywhere. I recommend to go everywhere and try. It's yeah, it totally depends on your interest. I think, to be honest, a lot can already be done also in the browser itself. So if you want to test, let's say, how readable documents are, you can do that, like browse the normal web. But otherwise, there are a couple of links, let's say WebXR experience, and then the store. They try to promote as much as possible. I mean, their goal is to sell content. So it depends how involved or how dirty you want to get, like installing APK or whatnot. I don't think it's, honestly, at the very beginning, I would stick to paid for experiences, even if it costs a bit in terms of learning what's feasible. It's I think it can give you a good experience, and doesn't have to be like, a lot of them have demos. You don't necessarily need to pay like maybe Asgard Wrath, I think, was or is sold or offer with a headset. If
Yeah, that
it's
was
not
bundled with
any,
my headset, so I do have that.
Yeah. I do recommend trying it just because you have it, even if you're not a gamer, because then you can see some ways to interact, something that are impressive, etc. And you can just uninstall it right after trying it for I don't know, 10 minutes and seeing what it is. But I think, yeah, in terms of discovering what's feasible beyond small demos, I would say it's a good way.
So I have to say, not that long ago, I went through looking for WebXR experiences. I didn't find any good ones. Obviously, I felt a bit stupid, but when I go to the WebXR pages, it's just, so maybe that's, no, well, just one second, just really quickly. Maybe on our own lab, we should curate a few links to external WebXR experiences too, because they're not actually super easy for new people to find. I don't know, Fabian, can you give me a few links maybe?
Yeah, I'm putting some links
Thank you.
in the chat for this, but yeah, there are a couple of pages curating for this.
And yeah, Peter, please go on. Sorry about.
Yeah, I was also wondering, is it possible for you to create your own environment to be used when you enter immersive mode? Because like, it's dropping me in this apartment, sort of, and there's like the little mirror on the side, and I was wondering, could I go into Blender and build my own world and have it use that instead of the canned one that comes with a headset?
Good question.
But I know you have the preferences, and you can set what you want your immersive environment to look like, and I have a couple stock ones. I tried the mountain view and the futuristic apartment. And I was also wondering whether those represent the most realistic that are available, or is there something that has a higher level of visual fidelity to the real world than those?
But presumably you only see that room when you're essentially outside the apps, because if you're in pass-through or something, you're actually seeing the literal room you're in.
Right.
And if you're in most of the apps, unless they are AR, you're in the environment of the app. But Fabian will probably explain away my ignorance on this.
No, just so a quick word. I left because my browser crashed. So I also want to highlight that even good old 2D is not necessarily always stable. It's not just like experimental 3D or WebXR content. Now, if I heard correctly, Peter, you were asking if you could design your own like a welcome 3D space or something.
Yes, exactly.
I want to say no. I don't think Facebook or Meta allows that. I think there is a selection of it, but it might be feasible through like a lot of tinkering with ADB, like Android settings and whatnot. But I think by default they don't, because they have a couple of interacting elements like the mirror. But I didn't try, so maybe it's feasible, maybe it has changed, but I've never seen anybody with a custom one.
Yeah, I want to try to keep my system as close to stock as possible, at least for the first few months until I really have a feel for what it can do out of the box before I go try and do any crazy modding.
Before your virtual environment's full of empty beer cans and crisp packets.
Because I saw there was one web page that was talking about modding the headset in order to load a Linux distro on it and be able to do that from inside of developer mode by bringing in an APK
So
module or something. And
so maybe that was me, but as far as I know, you can't have a Linux distro proper because you can't root the headset, so you're stuck with Android. Some of the thing I did share though is that you can use, it's not a Linux distro proper, but you can use, I forgot the name, which allows you to basically install the Node.js, so you can have like a server, like HTTPS server inside the headset, so that you can go full offline and still be able to program like backend kind of things.
cool.
And it's not very risky because in the end you can still factory reset your headset. So at worst you go there, but you're not going to toast it. Basically, that's the good and the bad side of not being able to root the headset. They don't let you root it for whatever reason, maybe DRM, maybe money, maybe something else. But it means you can really go at it, do whatever you want, and it's not going to be bricked. Like it's pretty much impossible. But
So
yeah, I'll put the link to this, to the Android, the way to install more things on. But it's like yeah, it's to tinker quite a lot. It takes some time, but don't worry about breaking it. I don't think it's possible. And it's probably, if it is, then it's the Meta's fault, and then you can ask for an exchange. So
is there something equivalent to the Linux subsystem for Windows, but for Quest? So this is something that would give me your usual standard Unix utilities inside of a terminal view.
So it's called Termux, Termux. So you need for that though, and you can even use it like in boot mode or whatnot. I'll put the link in the chat. It's how to have basically a kind of Linux subsystem on Android, so that you can install also SSH, like the server, and then you can SSH to the device. You don't need to use ADB. So yeah, but for this, I'm pretty sure you need to have a developer account, which I think requires to share either your credit card information or your mobile phone with Meta at least once. I don't remember the detail. Maybe it has changed also since the last time I've done that. But yeah, there. Once you have developer mode, you can also do mirroring with screen copy, ADB, this kind of things. So I'm a developer, so I would recommend doing that if you want to tinker a lot. But yeah, otherwise Termux. It's whenever I get an Android device that's not Linux proper, pretty much my go-to in order to be able to install or tinker more with the device.
So is there a way to record inside the headset what you're seeing in world and then get that out to your regular desktop so that you can show people what it was that you saw?
Yep. So there is
Do you need
a
developer
camera
mode
button.
for that, or can you do that without developer mode?
You can do that without developer mode. So there is a camera app. I think it's a red button somewhere. You need to look it up. And if you do this, you can do like record either a screenshot or a tiny movie. And then with the app on your mobile phone, which you needed, I think, for the initial onboarding, so you need at least once, then you can use it to get back the video and share it.
So here's the funny thing, guys. While you're talking, I'm trying to be in here. I've recorded part of our meeting, as you know, in 360. So I have a secret link. It's one of them is uploaded on YouTube. And again, secret is not public. So I have to plug this in. Just for testing. So it wouldn't load. And then I go and do something else. And suddenly in the background, Fabian is walking up to me. That was an interesting experience. Shall I send you the link so you can try it privately as well, maybe? That's not what I meant. The 360 is very, very interesting. It isn't as good as it should be, I think, yet. And I'm wondering when there's finally a native YouTube app for the Vision, if that's going to be any better. Okay, I'm putting the link in here, but I will try to remember to remove it from our record because it's a chat record. But so that's the link to view inside YouTube app. I don't know how that's going to work, but if you want to try it, it's kind of cool. I don't know what.
Some browsers also can play videos directly in NB360 without the app.
That's very cool. So,
oh, I love that bookcase on the back wall. Whenever I see a bookcase, I just wish I could go through every single title on it and flip through the tables of contents and look at the indexes. Usually I tend to jump to the index first. I don't know why.
that's interesting. Those are I guess they're keywords because not every word is indexed, so kind of makes sense. Kind of.
I can show also what I showed a little bit earlier today about the real world meshing and the semantic labels of recognized furniture in the room.
Yeah, let's have a look. Hang on. Yes, please. I was excited about the keynotes in an hour. You must be dead inside if you're not. Oh, is Termux also something to look at in WebXR? Okay, cool.
Oh,
no.
here's a crazy question, Fabian. Has anyone worked out a way to get 3D off of flying drone into the headset so that you could be piloting it in a pass-through VR?
So it's I don't think anybody tried because I think you would both puke and lose your drone because I think in terms of latency, it's not something that you want. Usually they have their own how do you say frequencies basically that is not Wi-Fi. Also the range is different, etc. So technically it must be feasible. It's usually economically and performance-wise not worth it. Like I think a drone, like not entry level, but like a DJI, for example, with the FPV glasses, it's probably about the same cost as the VR headset. So probably feasible, but I think that yeah.
I imagine development on this is going on very fast on the eastern edge of Europe at the moment.
Indeed.
Well, I'll pass on anything that'll make me toast my cookies.
I mean, you can do exactly what Fabian is saying with just a straight view, but stereo view is probably what you're talking about when you're saying in 3D, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about stereo, Randall talked about it the other week, is if it isn't completely and utterly synchronized, you're going to feel horrible. Yeah. So yeah, that's that. But it is yeah, Peter. So in the high resolution paper I'm writing, I'm obviously referencing your paper. I'll try to share my paper quite soon. It's been
Sorry, I don't think you heard me when I started to present, and I will cut you off because I'm afraid I can't do sharing twice. So
no, of course. I wasn't. I didn't think you were ready yet. Yes, that's absolutely what we need.
No,
Go ahead.
it's my mistake. I was on mute. So yeah, sorry, just going with. So yeah, since couple of version, you can do, of course, setting up your boundary and not hit the physical wall with your headset on. But you can also do what's called space setup. And when you do this, is you can, for example, draw the door that you see on the left or the screen you see in the middle of my screen. And now, since the last version, the version 66 of the OS, is going to automatically detect, if you're lucky, I want to say, this is a door, this is a window, this is a table. So it can already detect some of those objects for you. You don't even need to draw them in the air.
Sorry, I was going to say you're not sharing, but you are. My window was obscured. Apologies.
No worries. And what you get out of it is this. So of course you don't need to see it. I kind of enable some kind of debug view. So this is in WebXR. So global mesh is the big white thing you see on the walls, basically. The table here is roughly matching the table. I think it's the yellow area. The shelf is the green area, and you see the name stem. And the screen, you just see the letter N, the green part, but it's still that. And why I think it's interesting is once you do this, instead of doing what I did during a certain PhD presentation a couple of months or weeks ago, you would, for example, put the post-it on your virtual screen, or rather next to it. So, for example, the post-it would be to the right there of it, not on top of. And this is also what I recorded a bit earlier today, which I think is in maybe a clearer view. So this is what the headset sees. This is my actual room, and you can see, of course, it matches perfectly. But again, for us, I think what's interesting when we develop knowledge work in the headset is that teal or light blue color is a screen, and it has the semantic label screen. So that means, for example, don't put things on top of it, like the post-it note or the table, and then put them horizontally rather than vertically against the screen. So it's a lot of space we can use in order to do better interactions, I want to say.
Presumably it's also a logical place if you're putting things into the environment. If you've got one or more screens essentially already defined, then it's also a good place maybe if you're adding more information, is in the area of that is then going to be broadly in the same sort of viewpoint if you're looking towards existing screens.
I put a link with the example. Also for the bit more context, this is done using A-frame. So it's also show, like initially I showed you just a cube with a sphere and a cylinder, like, oh, this is just for beginners. It goes all the way there to the 3D model of the world, which you can use also for physics. Like say you toss a ball and then you had physics and it's going to bounce against your rough shape of your room, which is, by the way, for the Quest 3, for example, is done with the depth sensor, not just the camera. I mean, I imagine I don't think they just explain how it's done, but I imagine if they have a depth sensor, they use it. And it's quite fast to set up. Like the room setup takes maybe a minute or less. So yeah, it's an interesting process. But yeah, indeed, what are the interaction there? Is it to show the screen or hide it, go around, etc.? I want to say that's again something for us to explore.
Oh, another question. Are there any programming environments available as apps within the Quest? You know, say a Python or something along those lines, where you just pop up a screen and have a language interpreter embedded in as an app without having to go through all the rigmarole of getting a subset of Linux running underneath Android. Also, is there a JavaScript terminal for the Quest web browser?
Like a console?
Yeah, can you like open developer tools like you would in the Safari browser, something equivalent?
Yes, but not directly in the headset, not as far as I know, which is also why, if you remember some of the video I shared of my environment, I added a virtual console in the 3D space. So I'll put a link to that also in the chat. But otherwise, what you normally do is you start Chrome on your desktop. And if you have developer mode enabled, then you can basically stream the content of the console to your desktop, and then you can also add code there or remove. It's quite efficient. It's a little bit annoying because you basically need to pair. So you need developer mode, and you need to allow the headset to be accessed from your desktop. It's not complicated, but yeah, you have to do it. And then from this, you can have the browser from the console of the browser in your browser on your desktop. So that's feasible. The console proper inside the headset, not as far as I know.
Well, it looks like a lot of room for Meta to improve the operating system over the next few years. So the headset should keep getting better and better.
That's the hope, but I also want to warn you, it's an emotional roller coaster because some things do break. So yeah, sometimes like version 67 might be worse than 66 on some aspects. I mean, if you look at it, it's everybody, I don't know, a lot of people are excited and frustrated about the same time. That the more they add things, for example, detecting furniture automatically, it's really cool. Labeling them and then being able to surface it back to developers is really cool. But maybe in some sense, for example, they are less strict with the boundaries so that you can include your physical desk with your physical screen. But then they warn you like with, oh, you have objects occluding your space, and then they prevent you from entering the experience. So it also, like, it's so much more complicated. Initially, a couple of years ago, you had the Quest 1 define like a square, and that's where you would stay, and that's it. And there was no like swapping boundaries, exchanging, deleting, naming them, etc. So you can do a lot more than a couple of years ago, but it's also, I would say, harder onboarding, and some things appear and disappear based on testing, bugs, new versions. So I just want to say it's the worst that it can be. It should only improve, but in practice, that's not the experience.
Of course, now I'll be jonesing for an omnidirectional treadmill, which is way out of my budget.
I'm not so sure, if you will. Depends what you want to do. I really don't often feel the need to walk around. I walk around if I put things in the room and it's all, and it's on the vision. But just as a general thing, my feeling is that, yeah, sitting down desk bound is actually pretty good because, yeah, of course, in a kind of a game type experience, of course, it's cool to walk around.
I recommend also, before you spend even $1 on the devices like peripherals and whatnot, like gloves or treadmill, etc., try them once, because I did try a couple of those. Gloves for me, like claustrophobic is not the right word, but I have a hard time wearing them if it's not like a super strong reason. So I wouldn't like buy and keep them. And the same for the treadmills. I did try a couple of them, and a lot of them, they need you to have special shoes, and sometimes even like grease under the shoes, which is like, why not? I understand. Yeah, it's strange, but it's not the strangest. The strangest is this is not how a human normally walks. So basically, like, you step forward, slide while kind of folding backward, and then keep on repeating it. And yes, it's true, it's kind of like walking, and it's also absolutely not. So it means different kind of muscle, etc. So it's quite powerful. So, and it's not cheap, and it's very bulky. So I don't know, I don't want to assume budget and space you might have available, but it's I think for most people, they put the headset on and like boom, vision and audio has been solved, and they imagine everything else also has. And so far, you definitely don't have the same kind of popularity. And I would argue it's because of cases like that. Like, walking is not solved. You basically want a bigger space or teleport or both. But those, I don't want to be too negative about like walking pads and whatnot, but please do try before you invest too much.
Oh, I think I saw one company was working on sort of like motorized roller skates so that you could be walking and it would roll you back to the center as you were walking along. Have
Yeah,
you tried
but
those? Are they any good?
I haven't tried this, but I want to. But I bet it's the same kind of thing that like it's heavier. I think maybe the Disney one that I saw, where the flow itself moves, is probably quite amazing, but it's probably costing like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not like $1 million, if you include the staff, and also it's a little bit out of reach for most. Not in my budget.
yeah, I think, Peter, a lot of those things are at this point quite gimmicky from what I've seen. And also just being in here and dealing with what space means is actually kind of an interesting challenge. You know, today, as I mentioned, I think before you came in, I was writing in the headset only with a Bluetooth keyboard. I didn't have any other computing devices for a while. It turns out for most of it, it's basically a 27-inch screen. Sorry, guys. That is what's useful now. Of course, we're going to expand on that. But it's partly the current thing is, you know, you have slightly blinkered vision. You know, you can move your head, and of course you do that. But, you know, the question is,
Can you draft and send an email from inside the headset with Quest?
yeah, you can. It's basically, well, this is what's really disappointing about the Apple things. It's just a floating iPad. There should be more released today in half an hour or so, 40 minutes of native Apple apps, because most of them are really bad on here. Sorry, you're obviously talking about the Quest as well. Are there email apps for the Quest? Yes. Fabian, please take over. Sorry.
No, but the question is, Peter, why are you even asking this? I'm quite curious.
Well, I was saying if I was typing with the Bluetooth keyboard, I'd want to just like email myself what it was that I was typing in the headset. If I want to like take a little note, the logical way would be to just like shoot it out as an email, unless there's like a notepad that would automatically sync with the desktop. If it was something like that, that would be even more direct.
Okay, so it's two different questions, but overall, so I have a bias. As you know, I'm developing in WebXR, so I believe the web is the platform and the OS pretty much. So if you have a web client for anything you want to do, you can use that because it has a browser which is based on Chromium, which is like, sadly, but have to be pragmatic, it is the dominant browser engine. So if, for example, I use Proton Mail, I never connected this on the Quest, but if I go on protonmail.com or whatever the URL is, I can open it in the browser, Bluetooth keyboard, I type a message, send, and voila. Like that's why also earlier I said just use the browser for a while, because for everything that feels like, oh, an app is missing, might be true. Maybe it's also the app is not needed because the web client is good enough. Like even just the so we have a Lego box there that Frode knows quite well now, and if you go on the App Store or the Play Store, you go on the Lego Education, you install the app, and voila, it works. If you go on the or education.lego.com, it's the exact same thing. So my point is, a lot of apps, they are just web pages with a browser or web view around them. So I want to suggest that as a habit, whenever you feel something is missing, look at the web version, and you can probably get most of it done this way without even developer mode or anything like this. Typically, when I have a new headset, for example, this is exactly what happened with the Vision Pro or with the HoloLens 1 and 2, is a lot of apps are not there, and you need to go like through crazy hoops in order to share files, because of course the vendor want to manage your entire workflow, and I don't like that. I don't have any like Microsoft product ever, not even the keyboard anymore, nothing. But if you have a HoloLens, they try to force you their set of tools. If you go on a web page for file sharing, voila, you can like create a video recording just as you asked before. Click on the upload button on the web page, and your file is online, and you can download it back from the desktop. So, in a lot of situations, that's feasible. Yep, Frode.
You're muted, Frode.
It's very apt you're talking about today. I've been writing a bit on this in the ACM piece, and of course, metadata is part of this. The sharing of information is a huge issue. So just wondering, now that I managed to redefine visual metas, including the JSON instantiation of visual meta, and yes, we can get better formats and all that in the future, but it would be interesting to try to focus on document sharing in XR as a thing with the richer metadata. We've looked now into annotation metadata as well, because one of the chapters in this article says that we mustn't forget that we are building something which the user will use in their own knowledge environment. It's not just a free floating thing. And it's really obviously great that Peter is in XR now, but it's also very educational to be reminded how crap it is, the infrastructures. And we have been tasked to improve the infrastructure as well. So maybe the method of sharing is something we should have another look at.
I'd like to be able to grab an object and stretch it and have it sort of like do a binary fusion and split apart into two identical copies of the object, so I could put one in one place, maybe give one to someone else. I think that'd be a real cool interaction to have.
Do you remember Project Starfire?
No.
Oh, you should definitely look it up. Can't remember the name of the company now, but one of the things they had, this was in the 80s, if it was a flat screen, touch screen interaction. If you wanted to copy something, you would pinch on it. And if you wanted to move it, you would touch it and move it, obviously. But if you want to make a copy, 2 fingers, and when you did this, one copy, the original would stay in your one finger and the other one would move out.
Perfect.
Right? Yeah, that kind of thing is really nice. But now it's up for us to invent those things, because there are very, very few OS level ones, which is probably a good thing. But like right now, talking to you guys, because for some reason there's something wrong with my right controller, maybe it's just the battery. I didn't have it, so I couldn't quit out of apps on the Quest. just couldn't leave. You know, these are crazy, crazy things. But there are also crazy, crazy opportunities for us to do better to an extent. So yeah, it's cool. So because we're low group today and so on, maybe we finish half an hour early. Selfishly, that'll allow me to eat dinner with the family before sitting down and saying, shh, it's the Apple thing, shh, to everyone.
Works for me. I can give you a little teasing though, just in the last few minutes. I worked a little bit, tiny bit more on the scaffolding, and I ordered and received already. So it's a scaffolding, but from a pedagogical standpoint. And roughly the idea is that students, no matter the age, have different levels. So when they come to class or workshop or whatnot, if you don't prepare materials in a way that is accessible for all of them and yet challenging, then it's going to be difficult for everyone, both the students but also the teacher, because you have to run from one student to the next. So I'm going to, and they have different, like I just started to skim through because I received it Saturday, but they have different concepts interesting about front-end scaffolding versus distributed scaffolding, where students help each other or where you have to prepare in advance. And it's quite interesting because it answers, or at least it begs the same question that Peter have asked today, which is like, oh, when you onboard not just the headset, but for example, a WebXR experience that try to help you change the world around you, how do you do this? Is the scaffolding just a metaphor? Do you help them by guiding the hand? You don't want to do them on their behalf because maybe they can do better than you can. So yeah, that's my little reading at the moment, and they were quite annoying because they have, most of the book is empty. It's basically forms, so scaffolding where you have to like actually think and say what you would want it to be. So it's interesting that the book itself, of course, is a scaffolding and is thus adapted to anyone who puts their effort into it. So I'll hopefully report back with a better prototype in a couple of days or whatever.
That's really cool, and I'm afraid that causes me to show something too. Because it's a common thing, what you're talking about, and very important. Mark and Chris and I discussed this early on as well in our studies. For academics of all, not just student children. So I've been doing this little thing that I just wanted to show you because scaffolding can mean different things in that sense. It can be, you don't know much about blood types, let's start with this. It can also mean you don't know much about this document. So this is author at the moment. And I'm currently using bold for myself. Some of these will be deleted when I export the document. So I have two views, excuse me, that are supposed to help me. One is the focus view, which does this. But in a sense, this is obviously written on the Vision because it's not very good with automatic spell check. But anyway, the issue with this is stuff that isn't in that paragraph is too hidden in a way, right? And then we have this view, which hides with grays everything that isn't bold, which is useful for one kind of going through, but they're all very kind of experimental. So this is what happened. So I did this. This is the new focus mode, which is anything that is bold is not as faded as the rest. So if you're using that as a scaffold to see what the paragraphs you're working on are about, it's useful. But because they shouldn't necessarily be, yeah, Fabian, go ahead.
No, it's briefly, it's interesting the way you show it is one of the first things that kind of surprised me in the book, but makes sense here, and I think you illustrate it well, is that scaffoldings are temporary. So the way you do focus mode, for example, is for the here and now. It's not focus mode all the time. Sometimes you need to remove it or hide it. So I think it's indeed interesting learning already, and to see you applying right away makes sense to me now.
Good. Before you come in, Mark, just wanted to say that, let's say here I have loosely bound, clearly in heading for me. It's not, it doesn't flow, right? So it shouldn't be there in the official paper. But as Vince said, when he looked at an early version of this a year or two ago, he would like to access it when he's reading. So the metadata should contain this kind of paragraph level or sentence level annotation of what the author felt things were about. So the scaffolding should go away, but it should be able to be pulled back depending on the person's reading experience of this. So the annotation metadata becomes important.
Tangentially related to this, I'd recommend The Connoisseur's Guide to the Mind by Roger Schenck. And he talks about what kind of a scaffolding you need mentally in order to explore new subjects, using food and wine analogies throughout. So one of the things he talked about is if you're new and you haven't had any wine, it's very hard for you to characterize one wine versus another wine. And then over time, you start to build a framework so that you can relate different wines to each other. Really great book. And let's see, the ISBN is 0-671-67855-8. I'll key it into the chat.
I put it in the chat with archives.
Thank you, Peter. Claude, please make a note of that book that Peter mentioned. Right, Mark.
Just a quick one, off a slight tangent, but just occurred to me because I made some mental note to mention it today. So I had a very frustrating weekend doing peer review of 3 abysmal papers. But it really brought home, pertinent to what we're doing in the XR space, is I got to this point, I had a paper with 50 references in, which a lot of which I had a strong suspicion as time went on were probably pretty bogus. And one of the things I really wanted to be able to do was to be able to look at a bit of the text and see the references or enough of the reference to know which one it was rather than a number. Basically contextual to the text I was looking at, because I was trying to get inside the head. I think this was just someone who'd written a paper for a different publication thing, probably got it rejected, rewritten it. Part of the thing I think was machine written, so it made grammatical sense, but had no real sense at all. It was supposed to be a literature review, but told you nothing, but had lots of references. And one of the things, but in trying to unpick the sort of thing and to do the job of reviewing it, I found myself really wanting the thing we discussed of being able to see a bit of the paper and sort of effectively as more like margin notes would have been, in a 2D space would have worked. Just having those things contextually there. And of course, if the document knew that, so it had sufficient information within it that its display environment could do that, that would be really interesting. Yes, Frode.
So it's interesting you should say that. Obviously, our papers overlapped somewhat. I've skimmed yours to make sure there were some quotes, some TED things you had that I then deleted so we don't say the whole thing. But the terminology of kind of expanding a document when you read it, which we call decomposition, which is awful because it sounds like a rotting corpse, right? That also makes us look at document composition in this sense. And that's where what you're talking about becomes very interesting because, first of all, document composition is partly to do with headings. That's the most basic structural element. And then there's references like, Dave Millard said, references is actually kind of a proceedings in a sense. So yeah, I really want us to look more at writing for Mark for the kind of reading he's doing now to really tear the document apart. Well, that's the whole point. That's what academia should be if you're doing it thoroughly.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned composition. I mean, essentially that's the gist of my paper, but I'm deliberately not trying to imagine what the UI is or how it's coded. I'm actually just thinking about what are the things that, if you free yourself from the tyranny of print, and you say, forget it, let's imagine we never had to have invented the printed page, but you want to present information to people. How might you do it? So what are the bits and pieces that you want? So you might want to know that this section relates to this figure or this reference and that kind of thing. And that's the thing I've been looking at. And actually, it's amazing what a rich pickings are in the hypertext field. Most of it forgotten. Basically, it was forgotten when the web came along. So there's lots of stuff to be rediscovered there. that I think makes for useful writing. So in terms of the composition, it is this thing about outlines are fine, but outlines are innately linear, which is not actually helpful often when you're trying in the early stages of writing. And a thing that's massively overlooked is the flexibility of something like a map space, where things are what you choose them to be, and they go where you choose them to go, when the initial part of what you're dealing with is still flexible, where the narrative is, in some cases you may be given a narrative, that's fine, but in a case where the narrative is not yet clear, or you're seeking to knock back yourself into a strict linear structure, it often actually, you want to stay well away from an outline. The outline will emerge of itself when you've actually got the structural parts. So in a sense, maps come before outlines, but of course our education is generally outline into linear output, which of course is totally allied to print, so it makes sense. So the challenge now is in the post-print era, when we don't print stuff anymore, how we step away from that and have better design tools, better text creation tools.
Yes, just briefly going through some of Doug's old stuff. He didn't use the term hyperlinks early on. He used the term citation links. How cool is that?
Well, Peter, bless him, actually put me onto it's a slight tangential quote, but it's Licklider in 65, essentially referring to citation links. Although this is in a time when people really didn't even have screens, so it was more a mental abstraction. But it points that the provocation has been there for a long time. I think the interesting thing, and what consideration of XR has unlocked for me, is we can go back and look at things that 30 years ago were conceptual and really hard to implement, and now actually we probably have the mechanism to implement them, because the kit's faster, it's more capable. We have more malleable environments, sort of like the possibility of AR and XR. So that I think is extremely exciting, and it's a chance to actually go and dust off some of these really great ideas.
Indeed. And on that note, let's adjourn till Wednesday.
Okay, see you Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'll be more time exploring inside the headset, and I'll give you more impressions.
Good luck enjoying everything tonight. So I'm just checking on my iPad here, make sure it's set up for viewing should I need it, and it is. So that's good. So yeah, wonderful. And let's plan our next FOT social. I very much look forward to that. All right, bye guys.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.